Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest in the webinars hosted by HVS, Bird & Bird, AlixPartners, and EP. Today, we asked a question about decrypting data and AI in hotels. So much has changed over the last 5 years. Companies today possess 3 times the amount of data and MI at their disposal compared to 2019. And yet most will still privately note that there are still issues over trust and the fear of how data, AI, and data can actually impact on business. It's a strange one, isn't it? Because at the same time, most C-suite will note that digitalization will actually act as a potential solution to how we raise service levels, maybe more importantly, raise margins and improve margins, and then support employees for the better. How do we create that perfect marriage between AI and people to best effect? Or on a journey at this point in time in learning. There's a lovely mischievous quote or school of thought that noted that actually do CEOs anymore need board meetings? Because actually they have so much data at their disposal, so much information, that actually you can get away without having board meetings. Maybe more seriously, CBR recently released a report that noted that AI can predict and forecast not just economic trends, but societal ones too. It can forecast guest and consumer changes, forecast population growth, health analysis, even changes in communities and in neighborhoods too. It can tell us potentially how society and actually our customer will change over the next 10 years. What we have at our disposal today is evolving all the time and will make us ever more effective if we can find the right solutions. So we asked today a number of questions. What are the risks? How do we protect our businesses? How do we use AI to create value and support investors? We are delighted to welcome a number of exceptional speakers today. Firstly, Olivier Abatin, who's the Managing Director of AlixPartners. Heather Catchpole, an associate with Bird & Bird. They'll do the opening presentations to you. And then once we've done that, I'm going to pass over to Russell Kett to host a panel of some real experts in this field. And I think with this, we'll find this all very insightful and illuminating as we go. Please, at all times, feel free to ask any question to any of the people or to ourselves via the chat button. If you ask it on the Q&A button, once you ask it, we will endeavor, I promise, to get back to either during the session or after the session. So rest assured, your questions will get answered. Izzy, can I now ask for some poll questions so we can just get a feel for the audience, please? Now, we've got 4 questions to ask you. Firstly, what stage are you at implementing AI in your hotels? Number 2, how long do you envisage it will take to achieve full implementation? Number 3, he says, where do you expect the implementation of AI to have the biggest impact? Back of house, front of house, customer journey, or something else? And 4, what do you think is the biggest challenge or concern with implementing AI and managing data? Be interesting to see the answers to these questions as we go. I'll give you just a bit of time to answer them. Great. Izzy, can we see the results? Thank you. So what stage are you at implementing AI in your hotels? Interestingly, 45% have not yet started. I mean, it is one of the really interesting things that this subject's been talked about for so long. It's only this year I'm finding that people are really getting involved in that discussion, which does say a lot. 45% not yet started, 31% in the planning phase. Very interesting. Number 2, how long do you envisage this to take to full implementation? 53% within 2 years, 26% within 5 years. Number 3, where do you expect the implementation of AI to have the biggest impact? 57% back of house, and 30% on the customer journey. And number 4, what do you think is the biggest challenge or concern with implementing AI and managing data? Lack of personal touch, loss of personal touch, 18%. Data privacy and security concerns, 39%. Yes, I find that is the constant piece throughout. And 32% lack of expertise and training. It is fascinating. Thank you very much indeed for that. I think this lays the ground for a fascinating discussion to come. So, Olivia, can I firstly introduce you to come and chat to us, please? Olivia, good morning. Now may I pass over to you. May I pass over to you, and good luck. And I look forward to coming and listening to what you have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Let me share my screen. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Olivier Apton, and I lead digital innovation, data and AI at AlixPartners. And it's a real pleasure to be here today to discuss with you, the transformative power of AI in our industry. Well, let's start. So I won't be diving into the risk that we saw, in the questionnaire. Either we'll do that later in the morning, or the legal aspect of AI today. But instead, I am here to share with you how to unlock the full potential of data and create real value from it. As Chris said, hoteliers, operators, OTAs already have access to wealth of data. But the challenge is knowing how to harness it effectively. And that's where AI or Gen AI, we'll discuss that, steps in. So let's start with the customer. Always start with the customer. In our case, the customer is the guest. And what guests are telling us is pretty clear. According to the 2024 IMMJI global study, 61% of travelers are open to using Gen AI today to plan their trips and stays. Even more telling, 58% of them feel that AI enhances their experience by tailoring services to their individual preferences. But AI role doesn't stop there. 62% of guests now prefer interacting with AI-powered chatbots for simple requests rather than waiting for human assistance. However, and we'll come back to that, this is super important, 70% of the people still prefer human interaction for more complex needs, which means AI must be carefully integrated to complement, not to replace, the personal touch that defines hospitality. So the message is crystal clear. Guests are ready today to embrace AI, but only when it truly adds value to their experience. So, well, this is a key page of my presentation. It's pretty complex. How should hospitality players, especially hoteliers and operators, leverage AI to enhance the guest experience and drive business performance across the value chain? What does AI in hospitality truly mean? So let's break it to simplify into 4 key domains, each offering very practical, down-to-earth, actionable opportunities. Domain 1, marketing. Imagine this. Instead of generating email blasts, AI allows hotels to create highly personalized booking experiences and targeted marketing campaigns. Think about a guest who is a wine enthusiast. AI can identify that preference from past bookings or even from online behavior and tailor a campaign that offers wine tastings at the hotels, restaurants, or tours of local vineyards. Isn't that amazing? Domain 2, sales. AI doesn't just help sell rooms. It segments your most profitable guest categories, models demand, and dynamically adjusts pricing. For instance, let's say there is an upcoming event or convention in town. AI can forecast the spike in demand and automatically adjust room rates while offering upsell opportunities like meeting spaces or catering services. Domain 3, operations. AI is a game changer there. And this is what we saw also in the questionnaire by Chris earlier. Picture a hotel with housekeeping assignment perfectly aligned with checkout times, thanks to AI. Not only that, but AI can forecast staffing needs, so you don't have too many or too few people working in a hotel at a given time. And with predictive maintenance, the hotel's HVAC system, for example, can alert the team before it breaks down, ensuring a comfortable stay without any interruptions. Plus, AI can optimize energy consumption and reduce waste by predicting when and how much food or energy will be needed, contributing to both cost savings and sustainability efforts. And we'll see that this is in place already in some chains. Domain 4, last but not least, I would say, in-hotel experience. This is where AI gets really personal. Imagine a guest checking in via facial recognition, entering a room that automatically adjusts to their preferred temperature and lighting. AI-powered virtual concierge can offer personalized recommendations, whether for local attraction or in-hotel services, and voice control rooms allow guests to request amenities or set up a wake-up call just by speaking. Bottom line, on these 4 domains, these are tangible real-world opportunities, but they require a lot of efforts. As mentioned, as we saw in the questionnaire, we are not there yet. It's not implemented yet at scale. There are some initiatives here and there, and we'll come back to that. But there is a lot of effort to bring that to life at scale for the operators. So hotel needs to integrate these technologies into their existing workflows seamlessly. It's not just about tech and deploying AI. It's about embedding it into how the business operates every day. It's about change management. And it requires resilience to scale up and persistence to ensure this innovation really stick. But before we get too carried away from the promise of AI, let's pause for a moment. Let's step back. There are some valid reasons why the hospitality industry today hasn't fully embraced this opportunity yet. And we have seen that also in the questionnaire. First and foremost, hospitality is and always be a human-centered industry. As Sébastien Bazin, the CEO of Accor, frequently reminds us, Accor is a human capital company. Their employees aren't just workers. They are artists, individuals who bring heart and soul to every guest interaction. The people-first culture is a cornerstone of the industry. And there is a natural concern, and it's a true concern, that AI might, if not used well, disrupt the human connection that define hospitality. Then, of course, we have some of the more familiar concerns around AI, relevancy and accuracy. AI is not perfect. And when it makes mistakes, especially in guest-facing application, the consequences can be severe. And there are costs. Implementing AI isn't just about the tech investment, as said before. It's also about change management. It means reshaping workflows, bringing in sometimes new people, which can be a difficult and costly transition. And then, let me close with data privacy and security. There is a huge concern, and Heather later today will speak about that, especially when guests are entrusting hotels with more and more personal information. And as we'll discuss later, ensuring data security is critical to earning and keeping guest trust. Well, this being said, let's go now to some initiatives on the ground. So where do we stand today? Let's start with solutions. The future of AI is already here with a dynamic ecosystem. You can see that on the page of startups, scale-ups, big tech companies offering cutting-edge solutions to operators. Let me share just a few powerful examples. I will not go through all of them today, but I'm very happy to go through them later offline with some of you as needed. So let's start with in marketing. Let's take Revinate. Revinate is a suite of AI-powered tools that can sift through vast data sets from guest interactions, social media, and reviews all at the same time. It helps hotels then segment their customers, predict behavior, create personalized marketing campaigns that resonate with each individual. Then there is Snapshot, which aggregates data from multiple sources like PMS, booking engines, social media, again to identify trend, forecast demand, optimize pricing in real time. It's a kind of insight that turns really data into dollars. In operation now, let's look at Alice Housekeeping, which automates room assignments, predict maintenance needs, speed up response time for guest requests, helping hotels run smoother and more efficiently behind the scene. Sona AI is another one. It helps hotels achieve productivity gains by deploying staff more intelligently, ensuring the right people are in the right place at the right time. And finally, let me finish with Saba Hospitality, a very interesting one. It powers virtual assistants and digital concierge services. These AI-driven tools manage guest inquiries, provide recommendations, handle services requests with a level of personalization that enhances the guest experience, taking service to a whole new level. And these are just a few of the solutions out there. There are hundreds of them in the world. The possibilities are endless, yet the adoption is not there at full power, I would say. On the other side now, let's look at the big hoteliers, the big chains, what they are doing. These are real-life examples. Let's start with Hilton. And its virtual concierge, you may know, Connie, powered by IBM Watson. Connie helps guests with everything from local recommendations to hotel amenities. But Hilton's AI journey doesn't stop there. Their AI-driven energy management system, called Lightstay, has generated, from what Hilton says, up to 1 billion in saving over 15 years by optimizing not only energy, but also water and waste usage across their properties. Next one is Marriott. They're also making great strides with this virtual concierge, called this time Ren AI, enhancing guest interactions. Marriott is also using AI to optimize housekeeping and maintenance operation. And by analyzing data from room sensors and guest feedback, Marriott can predict when a room will need cleaning or maintenance. It's not rolled out everywhere at Marriott, but there are some initiatives, some hotels, some proof of concept already in place in the network. Now let's go to the Ritz-Carlton, of course, part of Marriott. AI is reshaping and booking the reservation process there through what they call Chat Genie, an AI-powered chatbot that helps guests make reservations, request amenities, even offer personalized suggestions based on past preferences. And finally, another example with Mandarin Oriental, which is using AI-powered optimization tool to reduce food waste by a remarkable 36%. This is amazing. By predicting demand and consumption patterns, they are not only cutting costs, but also contributing then to sustainability efforts. It's really a win-win solution there. These examples show AI is not a buzzword. It's not deployed at scale, but there are many initiatives out there. It's already there in some hotels around the world and delivering, real value. But while AI opens up a world of opportunities, as we said, it also brings challenges, particularly for the workforce, because the fear that AI can replace people. So a notable example comes from Las Vegas, where the hospitality workers union successfully negotiated limits on the use of artificial intelligence. Interestingly enough, they secured an agreement requiring a 6-month notice before AI is introduced in any area of the business. This is not just about protecting jobs. It's about giving workers and employers time to adapt, to anticipate to potential changes, ensuring that technology enhances rather than disrupts their livelihood. It's also a reminder that while AI can drive efficiency and innovation, it's equally important to consider that the human impact and create balance, thoughtful implementation that work for both businesses and their people. So with all that, how you can start, how to think about it very practically. First of all, my first advice would be try not to spend too much time focusing on what is my AI strategy. Rather start by identifying what drives costs and complexity in your business, or what would be an improved customer experience. Start with a few priorities. Start small, identifying 1 or 2 ideas. We've seen that at Hilton, at Marriott. 1 or 2 ideas is enough that you can implement quickly to demonstrate value, drive learnings, and embark the whole organization behind these initiatives. It's not only about tech and AI. You need also to develop the training and support. You need to anticipate the support. for your teams to get them on board, because in the end, hospitality again is a human capital industry, and you want absolutely to take care of your team the right way. Let me finish with this quote from the Amara's law. We tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. Everybody's talking AI. It's already there. We have seen it. But for now, there are proof of concepts, initiative. It's not there at scale. This is for the short run. But don't get me wrong. In the long run, AI will probably be a revolution in the industry in a lot of along the value chain. So don't underestimate that. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you, Olivier. That was great. Really interesting. So, Olivier, just a couple of questions if you're still there.
Of course, I'm still
there. Hi, sorry. So I was just intrigued. So what you advocate is gradual evolution for companies? Because actually, interestingly, the argument is that actually companies have been resistant to get into really drive strategies. Do you think we're lagging behind, or do you think this is just a natural evolution we're going through?
I think, when you step back and you look at other industries, I think hospitality is a bit lagging behind because of all the risks that we mentioned, but also because it's by definition, by nature, a human capital industry. And the human touch is so important. But I think it's okay. It's all fine, because you have to think big. And as hoteliers and operators, you have to think big, but you have to go gradual. This is a revolution. You have to, implement initiatives, show that it works, embark people around them, show that, there are opportunities out there and not only risks, and then it will work. So don't plan for a quick one-shot revolution, plan for gradual evolution. And that we've seen, in the questionnaire. People are thinking more, I'm going to implement that over the next 2 years. So don't rush, take your time, but for sure, you have to embark into that journey.
Really interesting. Thank you, Olivier. That was great. Thank you very much for your time. Heather, can I ask you to come and join us now? Heather Catchpole?
Of course. Let me share my slides.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. And thanks very much for having me. So yes, my name's Heather Catchpole. I'm an associate in the privacy and data protection team at Bird & Bird. We're an international law firm. I'm based in our London office. And so obviously we've just heard from Olivier about a lot of the opportunities being created by these tools, but I'm now going to delve into a little bit about legal risk and how importantly to protect and navigate around those risks. Olivier has brought up a lot of examples of the kind of vendors which are already on the market, and indeed the larger chains are already deploying this kind of technology, so that opportunity is definitely there. But as we saw from the polling questions earlier, a key concern is how to navigate the legal risks, and that can be a bit of a staller on perhaps the implementation of these technologies. And I think we're here today really to say we're not sort of going to wave a red flag and say absolutely they're too dangerous, don't implement them. But I think it's all about having a kind of process for assessing risk, conducting an impact assessment, and making sure that you're implementing the tech compliantly. And I'm going to give you a few tips with some kind of practical examples of how to do that. So just to start with, I'm going to talk about the overall legal landscape, since I think even if you're not within the kind of legal team within your business who's going to be looking into this in a granular way, I think it's really important to be aware of the kind of overall framework and the key areas that risks exist. We've obviously talked about data and security, and indeed on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see GDPR and e-privacy remain crucial to a risk analysis of any new AI technology. GDPR covers the processing of personal data. That's incredibly broad. It can cover sort of directly identifying information, but also sort of demographics, characteristics, and online identifiers. So cookie IDs, IP addresses, information that's linked to that information about your guests, your suppliers, or business contacts at your suppliers, your members of staff. So GDPR obviously has a very broad remit. We've seen that in the media already. We've seen that a breach of GDPR can have significant regulatory impacts, which is perhaps particularly important in an area like hospitality, where sort of trust of guests is so important. Um, and I think important to note that when it comes to AI, it's not just about data breaches and security breaches. The risk from GDPR also comes from sort of am I using this technology? Am I processing personal data in a lawful way? Do I have a lawful basis to do this? Because as we'll come on to, sort of enforcement risks can come from simply not using the tech in a way that's fair and responsible and that has a lawful basis. Secondly, e-privacy. It's a bit of a more sort of specialist law than the GDPR, and it looks at things like, for example, direct marketing communications. So if you're sending out email campaigns, that's regulated by e-privacy. Also, cookies is a really important angle, accessing information on device to track people, which can obviously help with marketing efforts, but that is also caught by the e-privacy rules. So GDPR and e-privacy sort of already exist as an area that we're very familiar with. But I think I also wanted to bring to your attention these sort of new laws that are coming through, particularly in the EU. The EU has a digital strategy and has been rolling out several new regulations in the last few years and also upcoming. And what we're seeing now is AI specific laws. So not sort of technology neutral like the GDPR, which applies across a broad range of technologies. AI laws actually kind of specifically regulate the use of AI systems. We've got the EU AI Act. A lot of fanfare has been made about that. It's now in force as of August 2024. There's going to be a long grace period, so it's not actually fully applicable until 24 months' time. So that's August 26. However, some provisions are going to come into force or become applicable, sooner than that. So particularly those around prohibited AI and also general purpose AI covering LLMs will come into force slightly earlier. So important to be aware of those. And then also just a sort of catch-all at the end of the slide, that's not all. As I say, there's an EU digital strategy and there's various other areas that when your legal team's sort of performing a risk analysis of a new product, they will need to think about. So the Digital Services Act is an example of a new online safety law. We've also got the Online Safety Act in the UK. That will cover things like, for example, deployment of a chatbot on an online platform. Sort of, is that taken into account in the sort of systemic risks of that platform as opposed to users? Also, the Data Act is really important when it comes to things like connected products, and I'll come on to that in a bit later in this presentation. But I think a key takeaway here is obviously data protection is still really important, but there are other laws to think about as well. In terms of what we've seen in the enforcement space, enforcement's mostly come from GDPR and privacy laws, since they're the ones which are more established. And we've already seen regulators investigating, particularly big tech at the moment, but it's likely to expand, but use of AI models, the training of large language models, the use of chatbots. I think a big focus of regulators has been whether an appropriate risk assessment has been conducted in the first place. So a few of these actions or investigations have related to performing data protection impact assessments and whether they've been done properly. But also something the regulators are really focused on is the training of AI models. Sort of, has data particularly been scraped kind of indiscriminately from, for example, people's social media profiles? It's very difficult to do that, although not impossible. It's very challenging to do that in compliance with data protection laws. And so that's been a key focus of some of these enforcement decisions. So now I've given you a bit of the framework, just coming on to some of the specific use cases. So you've got some practical takeaways of how you would approach this within your businesses. Going back to Olivier's examples from kind of sales and marketing, Perhaps not one of the most kind of sexy, newest deployments of AI, but certainly one I think that's probably one of the most prevalent is using AI in an ad tech context. So there's a lot of vendors on the market who are saying sort of we can build profiles, perhaps of existing customers using AI, using algorithms, and then you're able to deploy those profiles to better target marketing going forward, targeting future ad campaigns. And I think the first point I'd make about this is that clearly personal data is going to be relevant here, and you need to involve your privacy teams or legal teams at an early stage because there'll be a sort of risk assessment process. They might need to update, for example, privacy notices and think about where consents are required, since sort of the information used in the profiles will be tied probably to either customer account IDs or some sort of online identifiers, and therefore will be caught by GDPR. I think an interesting development in this space is sort of we've heard a lot about first party data being leveraged more, particularly in light of cookies and third party cookies in particular. There's been discussion about them being phased out on particular browsers, and so companies are looking to pivot more to first party data, and that is kind of data directly provided by consumers, which can be a bit more sort of reliable as well. Interestingly, Google's recently announced that it's slightly changing tack in that direction. Actually, the phase out of third-party cookies won't be happening in the way we originally expected. They'll be moving to a kind of browser setting-based approach. I don't think that's necessarily going to mean we're going to stop seeing first-party data strategies being deployed, because first-party data is still really important, but it's just flagging it as an area that's really important to monitor. In terms of the AI Act in ad tech, I think that's more of a watch this space. So there's a couple of the prohibitions in the AI Act around kind of subliminal techniques used to manipulate individuals. I think maybe that will become relevant to things like recommendation algorithms on social feeds. I don't think it's immediately obvious that will be relevant to sort of a hotel's ad campaign, for example, but we will see. And also the AI Act's transparency obligations will be important if you're, say, using deep fakes or AI generated content as part of ad campaigns. But I think that's more one to watch and monitor for now. And the last thing I'd mention on this slide is something that often flies under the radar, but if you're targeting campaigns on an online platform, like a social platform that's caught by online safety rules, there's an indirect impact there, because online platforms under these new rules will need to make certain information about the ads being targeted there transparent to users. And that might mean that your main parameters for targeting your campaign are made public. And I think it's really important to make sure agencies who are running your campaigns for you are aware of that, and that the parameters are sort of what you'd expect. And also significantly, certain campaigns are going to now be prohibited on online platforms caught by online safety rules, especially, for example, campaigns based on sensitive data, like inference about religious sort of religious beliefs. So campaigns maybe targeting particular users based on a particular religious holiday. It will be more difficult now to execute those campaigns. The next use case I wanted to look at was chatbots. We've obviously seen from Olivia's presentation that a lot of the big chains, some of the tech that they're rolling out are these kind of virtual concierge type chatbots, where you might be able to, for example, access the chatbot via WhatsApp, receive personalized communications, customer service. And on the left-hand side, there's some of the chains that Olivia mentioned that are already using this technology. I think, firstly, again, looking to GDPR, the concerns there already exist. You've seen earlier in this presentation that a number of the regulators have shown great interest in deployment of chatbots and AI. I think important here to think about sort of what data is being used for this. So firstly, in the training of the model, are you perhaps fine-tuning that model with some of your own guests' data? If so, do your guests know about that? Have they been informed in the privacy notice? Have you thought about the basis in law on which you're doing that? Do you need a consent from them? Secondly, also the data that's used to personalize any recommendations. And again, that's a similar point to the ad tech use case we heard earlier. So important to consider particularly both of those. And also e-privacy, I mentioned that captures kind of direct marketing. So marketing through kind of direct messaging channels will be caught by direct marketing rules. So there might be an analysis to do there by your legal team about whether a consent is needed to do that and where in the UI flow you would be obtaining that consent. And lastly, just to mention again the AI Act, I think the transparency rules under the AI Act are really important in a chatbot context. So providers of the model, so that might actually be the sort of the ChatGPT or equivalent who's sort of providing you with the LLM to use, but they need to make sure that it's made obvious to users when they are interacting with an AI rather than a human, and you need to make sure that the tech you're using has that capability. Also, users of what we call emotional recognition systems have transparency obligations around those as well. And if say you're using that in conjunction with customer service, that obligation will be on you as the one using that system. So that's really important to be aware of. And lastly, I'll just come to the more operational use cases that Olivia mentioned. And I think a lot of these relate to particularly Internet of Things technologies or use of sensors in rooms or in physical environments. Again, really interesting from a digital regulatory perspective. And the areas you need to be thinking about here are GDPR is not necessarily going to be relevant, but it might be. And an analysis needs to be done there. Sort of if you're looking at, say, the temperature of corridors, whether your lifts are working properly, then potentially they won't be relevant. But if you're thinking about how are the appliances in a particular room being used over a period of time, and you know a guest is in that room, I think potentially the GDPR will become relevant there. So there's a sort of gating analysis to do before you think about then compliance. Something really interesting in the IoT space is the Data Act. So this is a new regulation, yeah, not very imaginatively named, but it's a new regulation that's already in force, but again, there's a grace period before applicability. But it's got some really interesting rules about the accessibility of Internet of Things data. So data holders have to make that data accessible to the users. I think in a hotel context, it's very case by case, sort of who will be the holder, who will be the user. It might be that the manufacturer is a data holder, but also this captures things like related services like apps that are used to control Internet of Things devices. And so there's an analysis to do there as well. So will you as a hotel need to facilitate that, or will you actually be able to benefit from it as sort of the person as the legal entity that owns the relevant devices? So I think that's an interesting point of analysis there. And lastly, I'll mention security obligations. So obviously these exist under GDPR, but we're now seeing kind of more sector specific or that's kind of you have sort of device specific regulations come out in the EU, particularly the EU Cyber Resilience Act captures Internet of Things devices. And so again, this is maybe more a point for the manufacturer of those devices, but it's really important in the due diligence that you're doing to make sure that those kind of obligations have been complied with. I'll just leave you there with I've set out a checklist to go through when you're thinking about at a high level how you're going to conduct these kind of legal risk assessments. And again, it might be your sort of legal teams who are doing this in practice, but I think handy to have a checklist there. And thank you very much.
Heather, that's very good. Thank you very much indeed. I assume you follow Olivier in believing really it's gradual evolution rather than revolution. People should take their time to get the planning right.
Yeah, I think that's right. And sorry, I don't know if you can see me on
No,
screen.
sadly not.
I
No,
can't.
not the mode.
Yeah, that's a shame. It was working earlier. But sorry about that. Yeah, so I think definitely by all means, you don't need to kind of think, oh, I need to sit back, have an AI strategy that will take me kind of months and months to prepare, and therefore I'm not gonna do anything before I've sat down and do that. You can, as Olivia says, kind of locate specific examples of where you want to deploy something. But I would say it's important to do that impact analysis before you do it, because obviously there are these risks. And again, the analysis doesn't need to be chapter and verse in something that also takes 6 months, but it's important to just do that first, even if it's just doing the right due diligence on your vendors, because that's a kind of surefire way to protect yourself. And looking at contracts, how liabilities allocated in contracts as well is really important. And so rather than just clicking through, say, the standard terms that you get from vendors, it's looking at other liability caps sort of sitting where you want them to sit and so on. I think just, yeah, it's taking that extra step before you implement the tech.
Well, thank you, Heather. That was excellent. A very good presentation. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Very good. Now I may introduce Russell Kett to come and join us, Chair of HVS London. Hello, Russell.
Hi.
I'll leave you to introduce your panel.
Well, with the greatest of pleasure, may I start out with an apology for the blatant advertising that's going on behind me. I'm moving house today. I'm in an area where there isn't such an auspicious background to look at, and so I had to substitute it with something, and this was the first thing that came up. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite my panel to put themselves on screen and unmute themselves and introduce to you David Campbell, who's the chairman of Rare Restaurants, Neil Kirk, the CEO of London and Regional Hotels, Joanna Korowska, the managing director for UK and Ireland at IHG, Ina Plunian, vice president at Cedar Capital Partners, and Philip Roveder, director of real estate at Numa. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this, I've noticed that you haven't exactly, as an audience, been active in generating your own questions. So this is your opportunity to do so. I've got some questions prepared, as you might imagine. And I've also got some great ones that my panelists don't even know about that were generated by ChatGPT, no less. But I want to encourage members of the audience to put forward your own questions. So please write them into the Q&A function. You'll find it on your screen. And I'll do everything I can to include them. And if we don't get them today, we'll send you something in writing afterwards. So just because some of these panelists will be less well known to some of you, I'm going to give them the opportunity to do some blatant advertising, but only for 30 seconds. So, ladies and gentlemen of the panel, please give me 30 seconds, or give our audience 30 seconds. Tell us who you are, and most importantly, tell us a little bit, but only a little bit, of where your own organization has got to. So sort of answering that first poll question that we had. I'm going to go in order that I have you here. So David, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Russell. I'm David Campbell. I'm chairman of Rare Restaurants, also of Early & Steen, and I'm a senior advisor to Sona, which you saw in the Olivier presentation, so quite heavily involved in that in terms of workforce management. My background is in leisure and hospitality. I've done everything from Formula One to running the O2 to Wagamama, Pizza Express, and many other restaurants. So, and from the hotel side, I've gone everything from planning permission from the what is now the Intercontinental at the O2 to being on the board of Pasha, which is a nightclubs, hotels group across the Mediterranean.
And briefly, 10 more seconds on involvement in AI.
So very heavy, well, a big fan of AI. I can talk about why I think it's really important, particularly important for, I think, for workforce scheduling, because that's an enormous part of everyone's cost base and can make that better.
Wonderful. Philip.
Hi, everybody. My name is Philip Roveder, Director of Real Estate at Numa. We are a tech hospitality company founded in 2019 in Berlin. Today, we have around 8,000 keys under management across Europe, and we very much consider ourselves a tech hospitality company. So tech is at the heart of everything we do, and we have 45 tech engineers within Numa, working consistently and continuously on the tech innovation and implementation of many of the solutions we've already been seeing today.
Thank you. Joanna?
My name is Joanna. I am a vice president and the managing director for the UK and Ireland here for IHG. It's 350 hotels roughly in both countries. And if you were to ask me how far we are, and I was quite surprised that we didn't have IHG on the slides before, we are doing what, let's admit it, everyone is doing, which is we are trying to understand how this new world unveils in front of us and how we can actually use some of the tools and some of the elements of what we call here AI, and I hope that we are going to be debating whether this is actually an intelligent tool or whether this is just a data processing tool that had been invented quite recently. And if you ask about myself, I absolutely passionately can talk about the role of a leader and leadership in this new era. And I think that this is ours on this call, biggest opportunity to embrace the technology and be the leaders within this context.
I can't speak for the presenters who went before us, but I can only believe that they realized that IHG would get enough prominence through the panel session that they didn't think it was necessary to include you earlier. Ina.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us and taking the time to listen into this panel. I work at Cedar Capital Partners, who are specialist hotel investors and developers. And I think when I think about our touch points with data management and AI in particular, I think that is very much centered around our relationships with our operators, and the day-to-day running of the hotels and how we use that in the hotels that we own and develop.
Thank you. Neil, last but not least.
So I work at L&R Hotels. We have 115 hotels around the world. I suppose what makes us different is we have a mixture of branded and unbranded hotels. So we see what the hotel brands are doing and what we try to do ourselves in our unbranded hotels. We operate across the spectrum. So we have everything from select service to luxury. And we see AI as one of the many tools that we use to assist in the operations of our hotels. It's probably not, the savior of everything we do. AI was described to me as an acorn that we use within our business to grow. It's not quite the tree yet, but it's being implanted across various measures that we do. And we are trying to understand how it can improve processes, how it can improve data, but I suppose wouldn't see it as the one thing that's going to drive our business. It's being put alongside a number of other elements. And going back to both presenters who started, hotels fundamentally are a people business and a service business. And we can't lose sight of that with AI, which should facilitate what the key deliverable of hoteliers are, which is to provide a personable service when people stay in our hotels. And AI should facilitate that rather than be the driver of it.
As you were speaking, Neil, and listening to what the others were saying, I just wonder how long it will be before we run maybe not our 21st webinar as this one is, but maybe our 50th webinar. And actually, we're talking to a panel of avatars who are representing whatever organizations we're presenting here, because I'm sure the technology is already there. So let's keep it to the practical. And that's enough advertising. Thank you very much, panel. What, in your experience, are the areas where AI can help a hotel? Now, I want you to choose one, and I don't want you to choose one that someone else has already chosen. So what are the areas where AI can help a hotel, and how far do you think the sector has got in implementing these? So moving along, Philip, why don't you kick us off?
So one of the areas that we look at AI or any tech innovation that we have basically in three fields: revenue and sales, guest experience, and operational efficiency. One of the areas we're focusing on right now is, as every hotelier knows, you get a lot of guest reviews on various platforms. How do you analyze the data? How do you collect the data real time? How do you use the data to review your assets, your performance of your assets in specific areas? And we're currently implementing AI-based technology to assess the data and then obviously make decisions from that. I think in terms of, if you ask me where we are today, I think it's quite funny we're talking about AI in hospitality when I think 5 years ago people were talking about technology in hospitality. And I think we understand as an industry compared to virtually any other industry, if you look at media, if you look at shopping, we're so far behind where everybody else is.
We've never been known for being early adopters of anything.
We've never been known for being early adopters of anything. That's correct. And I think this is quite ironic a little bit for me, because there's still a long way to go to just implement what I would call the tech innovation and we're jumping the ship here to go straight into AI. So I think we're still a long way to go.
Thank you. Joanna?
You asked us to give you an example of something that no one else has mentioned, so I will give it a thought and a try. I think that when we talk about our business, the hospitality industry, we focus very much on an operating hotel, and we have an opportunity also to focus on those above property structures and those one would call back of house structures. So if you think of an organization like IHG, a little bit to what Neil was saying, so to the organization that runs hotels above the hotels themselves, there is so much that processing data quicker and better and in a more anticipating way can do. And it can do it in the sort of retention space, so anticipating churn of hotels, of contracts, of relationships that are not as strong as they should be, analyzing them, analyzing information about the performance of the hotels, relationships with the owners, and then predicting which hotels are going to be at retention risk. And on the flip side of this, in a very similar way, predicting which hotels will switch sites are growth opportunities. And this is where sort of the gimmick usage of AI turns to being actually a tool of active decision insights or providing insights for decision-making process.
Great. Ina, your turn.
You'll see a struggle thinking of practicable day-to-day solutions that we're seeing implemented that have not been mentioned yet. We've talked about revenue, we've talked a bit about various back of house function in the maintenance field. We've seen it implemented also in kind of managing utility consumption, AI making suggestions on where we're overusing, where can it be reduced. But I think we've mentioned all of these to some extent in the presentations already. I think maybe to translate that into where do we see it lagging still the most, and where should it be most impactful, is really when we think about marketing, where today I think a lot of us we still we see some degree of CRM implemented, fairly generic use of marketing campaigns still, where the real driver and shift that we hope and should be seeing at some point is predictive marketing, really understanding guest segments and being able to push tailored campaigns. And we have seen very little evidence of that implemented across our portfolio to this date. And we can talk a bit later about why that might be and what the hindrances are. But I think that's maybe turning it upside down where we see the key gap still, because today I think the way we use data-driven and to some extent AI is really relieving operational pain points in the hotel, and some of those have been effective, and we've looked at some of the solutions we have in the presentations already.
Terrific. Just before I get to Neil and then David, Joanna, I'm being told by the powers that be, Big Brother or Big Sister, that we can't actually see you. Now, I can see you, but I noticed that you've got another channel open. So maybe while the other two are speaking, you could resolve that problem and maybe close one of those down if that's going to help. But I can see you, but I believe that those who are watching online can't. So apologies for having to trouble you and your technical department. But Neil, over to you.
Well, I feel a bit sorry for David. I'm not sure what's left. I suppose one element going on from where Ina's discussed it, which I think it goes more into the technology of AI and hasn't been discussed, is how AI will translate into usage within our devices. We talk a lot about AI in generic terms, and Joanna mentioned whether AI is actually artificial intelligence or just a very powerful data mining tool, and it's predicated on having the data available to give the answers, what period that data covers, and how human behavior's changed, and whether the data is representative of the market we're going into. I think the next step is going to be how the various devices we use. I think Samsung were the first to market earlier this year. Apple's new phone now has an AI capacity embedded in with it, and it's using data on the phones. Now, that gives you faster, quicker decisions, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full decision that you need to go into one of these huge data warehouses to get. So I think the next step is going to be how we translate, just like bookings went from phone to online to our mobile, is how AI goes from the big data sites on our desktops to our mobiles, and that interaction hasn't happened yet. So the next stage or continuing stage is actually how we adapt AI onto our devices and get quicker feedback, rather than the ChatGPT models that use so much power they largely have to be operated through our desktops or take some time coming through. So probably not quite answering your question, but I think most of the previous panelists covered areas that we're already using it. But I think actually the evolution of AI onto devices is going to be one of the next steps we need to understand, because if you look at booking data, how much actually goes through devices rather than on desktops, on phones, that will have to be the next step that is considered for front-end AI solutions.
Perfect. And David, last but not least, and apologies that someone had to be the last to go on this question.
Thanks very much for that. I'll remember that on the next questions. So let me just build on what Neil said. I mean, one thing to say up front, which is that I totally, a lot of people talk about sort of hospitality. It's about people, and is this going to replace it? And I really think that's the wrong way of looking at this. I'm passionate about hospitality, and that's all about people. I've run the O2 is the largest entertainment venue in the world, and it's all about live entertainment, and it has been that way for 15 years. So people and live events and experiences are super important. But AI is totally complementary to that, and it allows people to do their job easier. So I'm going to focus in on the sort of the workforce part of it, because the workforce is, let's say, a third of your cost base. And if I can reduce that cost base by 10%, that's 3%, which is all going to go onto my bottom line. But really importantly, when you get into the detail of it, there's two really important things. One is that you're saving costs by not having people deployed where they're overstaffed. But more importantly, you put people against busy periods when you've got enough staff at the right time and you can sell more. So we all know there's basic things you're going to get from room rates, but there's an awful lot of stuff you get from ancillary revenues, whether that's F&B or other things. And that requires the right number of people to be there. And then just to link it back to what Neil was talking about, what's really important is that works for the employer and the employee. So frontline people are the majority of employees. They don't have things that help them, and it's got to work on their mobile. They don't have access to, or generally have easy access to laptops and stuff like that. And the ease of employee scheduling should be the ease of picking up an Uber, where you literally just look at it, it tells you what you're doing, you can change things, you can do all the rest of it. And just to take that one final bit, if you go on an Uber, you go back and the driver rates you, always scary, but you also rate the driver and tell them what you think. And employees should do that after a shift. And then when you're building a schedule, you should be able to look and see what people have said about their shift. It was terrible, it was good. And you can respond appropriately. And you can put that all into the algorithms that you do to sort out where people go. So if you do things like auto scheduling a shift, there are 3 million different combinations of shift, and that's just not possible to do with a person. You have to use something like AI to help you do it. And to me, that's making someone's job easier, because that's just making the tech work for you rather than the tech work against you.
Great. Listen, I'm going to pause there because I just want to say that we've had a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to get to them shortly, but I just want to focus on guest experience for a moment, because AI and guest experience, that to me is perhaps the area where our customers will notice it more. So how do you think AI is transforming the guest experience, and what are the most significant advancements that you've seen so far? And if your own advancement is then yours, then everybody else will choose a different advancement, please, in the same way. Now, Joanna, you're going to go first on this one, so you can choose your own advancement, and everybody else is then going to panic to wonder about theirs. So let's hear from you now.
I would describe the impact, well, I will use your word, AI has on the guest interaction with one word, and it's a choice. So it provides a choice to anyone involved in the process of interacting with an AI or interacting with a tool versus interacting with a person. And there are people who would prefer this choice, or each of us are going to prefer this choice on a different day of the year. And hospitality and the industry is taking advantage of actually providing the choice and an ability to provide choice quickly and to Heather's point earlier, provide the choice in a way that's trusted by the customer is a secret sauce of having those early adopters in our industry showing up. And if I think of what then this interaction provides us as leaders, again, in adapting and improving the process with the guest process of the guest interaction is understanding what might have been an issue, and then back again to anticipation, back again to predicting as to what is going to be an issue in the future. So if a guest had asked for the 5th time how to get to a subway station, that must mean that directions to the subway stations are complicated.
Thank you. Ina.
Yeah. How to phrase this? I think somebody mentioned that we're definitely not early adopters, and I think that holds true mostly when we think about AI and the guest experience. You know, when I think about where advancements have been made, I would tend to argue that it's really kind of, you know, not even data, not even AI, it's just simple, well-executed tech solutions, you know. I'm glad if I can get into a hotel and the mobile check-in works and the mobile checkout works, and I can get into my room and out of it without, you know, having to queue at front desk or being able to WhatsApp somebody rather than having to dial 0 on the room phone, simple things like that, you know. So we're, from my perspective, country miles away from really truly impacting and shifting guest experience through AI. I mean, you know, we're starting to see some, again, applications on it, and I come back to this pain point, you know, expression of where it really matters, because it impacts, you know, bottom line. You know, we've actively started looking into in-room solutions when it comes to managing light and temperature preferences, remembering what people put in as their preferences, resetting it to avoid kind of spikes in kind of like turning it up and down, and regulating all these things. I've seen kind of bits and pieces of, you know, voice assistants in rooms, but it's really, you know, I think Joanna, you said gimmicky before, you know, it feels a bit that way, and there's still way to go to have a true meaningful impact on guest experience through AI from my perspective.
Okay, great. Neil, from your perspective.
Apologies, we may be having a fire alarm in the background. I think it's gone off for the moment. I think one of the reasons, one of the places that we have started to try and use it is within the chatbots we've talked about. So it's quick, direct answers to inquiries by clients. And I think I pick on that because it's an easy area where, to David's point, you can reduce the reliance on your workforce so they can be doing other things. So I think you take the answer with technology. You know, Apple phones don't get cheaper, they just provide you more with the same price. At the moment, some of what we're doing is allowing us to provide more with the existing workforce. Yes, then David was talking about the ability to deliver workforce savings, but at the moment, what we're iteratively doing is trying to provide more to the guest with our existing workforce base. Things like answering quick direct queries, which on a reservations line would prevent the reservation agents from taking new bookings. Allow ChatGPT, these AI solutions allow us to answer quick questions, which would take people's time from generating revenue enhancing calls rather than just servicing the guest. And that works well because the guests quite often just want a quick answer, a direct answer. Whereas when they're booking more complicated stays with add-ons such as dinner, massage, champagne, that's when you want to be speaking to them to be able to do the upsell, and that's where they want the personal touch. So it's, I suppose, an extension of what David was saying, is taking some of the more mundane tasks and delivering that quickly rather than the ones where guests really want a personal touch.
Perfect. David, your turn.
Right, I thought I was going to be last again. There we go. Thank you for not being. First of all, just to build on a couple of points there. One, as Ina said, I think avoiding gimmicks is really important. So I've to share her experiences of, you know, going a long way through the check-in process, only to be told that the credit card acceptance doesn't work and you can't use it, and you've got to go through the same physical experience as you would otherwise. And I'm sure in anyone here it's all perfect, but it's not always. So I think gimmicks are really important to avoid and test them out. To me, I think one of the most important things from a guest experience, and I'm passionate also about loyalty. And I think AI has got a big part to play in that, in terms of just trying to understand the patterns of people who are loyal towards a hotel business. where they're going, how often they're going, what are the things they do, what other services they take on board. And I think that allows you to build a better loyalty program. And as we all know, building your business on the back of people who are already using it is far easier than recruiting new people into it. And I think it also helps retention of guests as well, just because if you're providing more that people want, then that's easier to retain those guests rather than lose them off to somebody else. So loyalty would be my one from a guest experience.
Perfect. And last but not least, Philip.
Thank you very much. I think one of the key areas that I think that we need to focus on is what is the guest expectation of the product that we're providing? Because I mean, at the very core of the product is putting heads into beds, right? I mean, we're a lodging business, and the experience that we have is that in reality, the guests, they don't really care how the technology works as long as it works. And I think we've already mentioned the example of the iPhones. I mean, the reason why people love iPhones or Samsung is because you turn it on and it works. So I think whatever we do in terms of tech innovation, in terms of AI, as long as we can ensure that the guest has a seamless guest experience, as long as they maybe don't even feel it's there. So it's working in the background, it's doing what it's supposed to do, it's non-intrusive, it doesn't make you do anything on top of that you would usually have to do. In reality, it should make you do less than what you usually have to do. And I think the key focus, as I said, has to be on making it so efficient, making it so seamless, making it almost invisible, so that guests don't even see or feel it's there, but it just works.
Terrific. A question from our distinguished audience. It relates to how hotel groups, whether they're subject to a management agreement or a franchise agreement, how are they dealing with AI and how they integrate or inform their partners? So I don't know whether everybody wants to jump in on this one. I'm definitely going to come to you, Joanna, but I'll start with Ina in case she has a view on this as well. So please tell us how.
I learned an English expression, I think is as clear as mud, is what we say when things get really complicated around HMAs and data and who and I think this is manifold, right? Because it's not only a question around compliance. It's like simple things like who owns data, how do we share data, and under which frameworks, where's data really located? And I think that complication comes from the fact that with HMAs and with franchises even more so, your data, real estate owner and operator are separated just as much as the owner of data, in most usually operating companies that are locally set up by investors, developers, and the day-to-day handler of data, i.e., operators such as Joanna, is separated. And then it comes a question of how does data move through these databases? Where are they located? Also, where do the contracts with the vendor sit, which are normally, with the local entities, but again, day-to-day operation feeding input sits elsewhere. And the added kind of level of complexity to that is that, the people that do that handling are employed by a different entity than they're directed by. So it gets complicated really, really quickly. And I think what's been key to us here is to make sure that at the very start of the process, i.e. when you negotiate and set up management agreements, there's a really stringent focus on getting these things right, making sure that we have clarity on who owns and controls location, who's monitoring, who's liable, and you get the framework within which you operate right from the start.
Terrific. As you say, it's all as clear as mud. Neil, from your perspective, actually the question was originally addressed to you, but I broadened it a little bit so that others get a look in. What have you noticed?
I think it goes back to what Ina's saying in terms of how we share the data. I use a slightly different example when you look at cyber insurances, and the question is who are you insuring and who has the data? So the problem is in branded in our own hotels, it's easy. We can go through the process. We know who owns the data, where it sits. But within, take an IHG branded hotel or Marriott branded hotel, we don't have direct access to the data. Even if we are a franchisee rather than an owner under an HMA. We don't have direct access to the data. Even, you know, the websites and the data delivery sits with them. So that to us is, I suppose, a lack of the data that we have, but also then a lack of how it's being managed and how it's being utilized, albeit collected from our customers. So I think the next evolution of HMAs, franchise agreements, will need to be clear on that, both from an AI data perspective, from a cyber insurance perspective, as people start to have more and more access to more and more data, and it cuts across, you know, more than just reward models, you know, reward points, credit cards, and actual movements and how people are staying. Because, you know, one of the things I think some of the brands are doing, they're looking, you know, at crossing data from, well, he stayed in this hotel, but spent money 20 miles away, had dinner 20 miles away, used his phone 20 miles away. Therefore, is there a new hotel demand 20 miles away, and he's only staying in this hotel because it's the nearest one? You know, what governs the use of that data, and who owns that data, because you're crossing it from multiple sources. So I think that the legislation and the management agreements are probably the smallest part of it. It's all the other data sources that are coming into play as well.
I'm looking at David and wondering if you want to jump in on this.
I think there's probably there's far better qualified to answer it. So,
okay, so before getting to Joanna, I'll give Philip an option.
I think what Neil and Ina said about data is very interesting, because I mean, in reality, every industry, and that includes hospitality, we will have to become, unfortunately or fortunately, data experts. Yeah, because I mean, we will need to use more data. We're collecting more data. And I think also, if you look at how innovation within the hospitality industry is happening or not happening, I think if you followed the early presentations, yes, obviously the big brands, they have deep pockets. They have the balance sheet and the P&L to be able to invest into specific data-driven solutions. But if you look at the long tail of hospitality, and let's not forget 80% of all hospitality or hotel rooms across Europe are more or less independent, privately owned companies, how are they going to innovate at that level? And then I think together with that, if you look at some of the solutions which we've shown today in the very first presentation, how do you pick and choose between the solutions? How do you migrate data between the solutions? How do you connect the various solutions? And I think the big challenge that we have today, the market is so fragmented, and we're already as an industry starting from probably a very, very low level of initial tech savviness as an industry, that we have a monstrous challenge ahead of us, in particular for the more private independent hotels who are struggling implementing any of these solutions. And I think that the focus as an industry has to be, how do we make sure that as an industry we can innovate jointly, and it's not just the big 5, the big 10, or the companies like ourselves, the tech companies who've been set up around data to innovate in that space.
Terrific. Joanna, so have you really got deep pockets, or is this something that Philip has just tarnished you with?
I heard the comment, Philip. And there's so much to this question. And Russell, you gave me an intro, sort of expecting me to solve the big question. I think I have maybe 4 things to say. And I will start with history. So if you think of the industry, we have started as an asset-heavy, one would say properly service industry that had those wonderful buildings across the continents and was servicing usually luxury guests. Then we became brand companies, and we have been selling brands. And to Ina's point, the contracts have become a big repositories of what a brand is. A brand standard manual usually has around 1,000 pages or 1,000 points, because we are brand companies, whether it's us, Neil, to your point, whether it's Marriott, us, Hilton, whoever it is, we are brand companies. This is what we have been selling for the past 30 years. And we are moving to the new time. We are going to be selling something else. We are going to be actually delivering service to people like Neil and to our franchisees around the world in a different way. And an ability to deliver technology and to use technology, Philip, with a lot of money or with less money, or in partnerships with smaller companies like yours. This ability to actually attach all this technology to an existing system, this is going to be the next chapter of hospitality. And whether it is governed by the HMA or franchise agreement, Again, both agreements are quite old, right? The HMA concept is what, 40, 50 years old. All of them need to evolve to accommodate the world that is changing around us. And then coming back to the original question of the person who asked it, you did ask about how the big companies are actually, or whether it's easier or more difficult to be a big company, and what we are actually doing with towards our franchisees or as a service to our franchisees. What we do have versus those 80-60% of independent operators in Europe is indeed money to develop technological solutions that can be scaled. What we don't have usually, and again, it's not only IHG, it's all of us, all the big guys, we don't have the same pace as small companies, and we don't have the same courage or the same risk appetite as small companies. But again, similar to what we have done in the past, similar with revenue management solutions, the way they have actually been integrated into hospitality business 20 years ago, it will start small. It will start from innovation of smaller businesses, and those smaller businesses, then they will get absorbed, or the know-how is going to get absorbed by the big guys.
Terrific. One of our other distinguished audience members has asked a rather negative question, which I'm always loath to ask, but restrict your answers to a very short answer in that case, because I don't want to go down this road too much. But in fairness, it has been asked. So he's saying that will efforts to regulate AI use, such as was mentioned in the Las Vegas example, actually hinder business competitiveness rather than to promote fairness or efficiency? And he's harping back to the previous movement where technological progress was resisted by destroying machines. Goes on to say, by adding regulations, are we creating just an outdated way of blocking innovation instead of adapting to and embracing the inevitable changes brought by AI, just setting back the hospitality sector? So, David, you got to sit that last one out, so you can have the lion's share of this question.
Well, I'll try and keep it brief, as you suggested. So, I do think it is kind of, I mean, maybe it's from an operator's standpoint, but I do think it is quite dangerous, the kind of thing that's potentially happening in Las Vegas. But I mean, unions are quite strong, and I understand that happens. So there's kind of different elements of it. So I think when it starts to talk about things like robotics, I think that's a long way off, and I think that's unlikely to change. But I do think in terms of AI, I go back to what I said before, I think it's completely compatible with hospitality and people working there. And I don't think it's about, it may change the nature of some jobs, but it's not going to change the fact that those jobs are still going to require frontline people. There are always going to be people, you can't, or you shouldn't automate a bartender's job or a waiter's job, or some bits of housekeeping you can, but it's very, very difficult to do. And I think people just need to to me, it's a fundamental change, as big as the internet, as big as mobile devices. This is the big thing that comes along to do that. And I think if we try and regulate that, it's tantamount to saying, let's not have mobile devices. So we need to figure out a way around it. Having said all of that, safety is really important. So the regulation in the right place is important, but not regulation to block it, regulation to enable it.
Okay. I'm just going to look at the panel in case anybody else wants to jump in on that particular one. Philip, you wanted to say something.
I think the cheeky answer would be that we've been so slow. I think it will be very difficult for governments to actually slow us down. If you look at hospitality historically in adopting and adapting innovation, I think the more critical question will be, if you look at the various jurisdictions and regulatory bodies across the world, this is obviously a global business, and how do you make sure that you tackle the various different systems, elements, restrictions that you have, and how do you also remain competitive as a certain space, right? I mean, we all know the GDPR regulation between the US and Europe, and how people are moving data into data centers in Europe to make sure that they're governed by the right regulation. So I think the whole question ultimately will, in the long run, be focused on how are we managing the different legislative elements and restrictions that we have, being global operators in a very dynamic space.
Okay, terrific.
If I may,
go ahead.
If I may disagree with David a little bit. Sorry, David, for that.
Don't apologize.
I actually think that there is a lot of merit in the question. I think that one is regulation, global business, GDPR, all this, everything that we are discussing, but a human fear and a human protectionism towards what they know is a very natural behavior. And yes, the Las Vegas example sounds quite, to us, quite radical, but it's not ununderstandable that people will try to block the impact of something new. At least block it for the time they are in the industry, at least block it for themselves without thinking more strategically and long term. And that has happened in the 19th century, and that has happened with every big innovation, right? People were sort of organizing races between a train and a horse for a reason, because no one wanted to let go of the past. And I think that we are in a situation where letting go of the past that we know and that we mastered is going to be tough, not only for us, not only in this industry, but in general for all of us in the world.
Thank you. Ina, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I think when it's just important to also realize that when we talk about legislation, it's not just, GDPR and kind of e-privacy laws that we have to think about. Like just breaking it down to simple examples about labor laws. There are very practicable examples of how platforms, that are housekeeping platforms that are implemented, just because it's the easy example, by being able to better track overtime, split shifts, starting time, ending times are actually enablers of being able to, well, monitor and also enforce on ensuring that, these regulations are being followed, and are really helpful in doing that. So I don't want to comment on sort of like maybe the more psychological impact of it, but just to add another perspective, that regulation can also mean something very practical in the context of running a hotel, where we have seen technology-based solutions be really helpful in pushing the monitoring and compliance with regulation.
Terrific. Neil, I don't want you to feel left out, but if you want to add something, it's your turn now.
I think it's understanding that people will want to ensure and protect their industry. Hotels have always had a long, because human capital is such a large part of the hotels, it's always going to be something that needs to be taken into mind. But to David's point, as long as we are clear on what we're delivering, those challenges will always be there, and we will always have to work with them to deliver the best for our guests and ensuring we have a full workforce. So it's the same challenge, just through a different lens that hotels have had over many years. So yes and yes, but it's something that will just be dealt with as part of the evolution of what hospitality is.
Okay. We're getting towards the end of our session, and I have a question here from one of our audience about generative AI, Gen AI. Panel, do any of you have any experience of this, and in what fields do you think Gen AI can create a revolution, they're suggesting, in the hospitality sector? So can Gen AI create a revolution? Neil?
Thank you. I'm not. A revolution indicates that it will completely change how we look at hospitality, and hospitality goes back to people sleeping in beds. So I don't think it will be a revolution. It will change how we look at it. It goes back to how it's embedded within devices, how we communicate with our guests. So again, quick answer, I would say no, but it will continue to adapt how we interact with our guests to know what they want better and be able to deliver it more directly. But ultimately, we're delivering the same thing. You can't outsource someone sleeping on a bed in a city they don't have accommodation in. So it's not revolutionizing it, it's a continuing adaptation of it.
I think the industry would like to try and find a way of doing that, especially when Taylor Swift's in town. Quick answer from you, David.
So I think it's already there in many ways, and I think if you look at the evolution of AI, and particularly generative AI, it's just going to get smarter and smarter. So the reasoning part of it is going to become more human-like, which effectively is what generative AI is doing. So again, I think it's a common theme from me, but I think we need to embrace it and see how that works best for us. So it's kind of, I always think of about AI as kind of like an intelligent intern, and it's kind of gone from somebody who was coming out of primary school to somebody who's now out of secondary school, and in a couple of years they're going to be well out of university, and in a few years they'll be doing things that are kind of partly smarter than us. But let's embrace that, because it's still controlled by people.
Planning for our own redundancy, eh?
Not at all. And there's no redundancy in this. This is not about losing jobs. It's about making jobs better and more enjoyable for people. It's the same as the Industrial Revolution. You know, nobody wanted to sit there and bang out horseshoes all day long. So you evolve and change, and this is no different than that.
Okay, very quick answer from Philip.
I think what Neil said is very true. I mean, the real product, the physical product, it is the guest experience that you have on site.
Okay.
I think generative AI can be super interesting when you look at targeting certain customers with bespoke content, like many of the big ad companies are already doing it. So I think it's very real. It's already there. For hospitality, it's a question of gathering the right data and then making sure it works.
All right. An even quicker answer from Joanna.
Part of the story we are discussing, but not a revolution. And a second comment to that, I think that the real question is, what is the difference and what is the ability of being truly original when you are Gen AI versus truly original when you are a human?
Lovely. And last but not least, Ina.
I have yet to see real revolution, and I don't, from coming from AI in hospitality, and I think we're years away from that really being the case. But I would, concur with what being said. It'll change how we interact, how we market, how we work in the background. It will not change the core of our business.
All right. Now, unfortunately, time has marched on, and I'm going to ask you my final question, and I'm going to thank you all now, because I'll probably forget to do that afterwards. But I want a very quick one-sentence answer, one breath, if you like, to indicate the brevity of your answer. Ladies and gentlemen, what real progress do you expect that our hotel industry will have made in the next 12 months with regard to data and AI? What real progress, David?
I think I go back to what I've been saying. I embrace it. And the worrying stat that I got out of the survey up front was 45% of people on the call haven't yet started. So I really hope that number in 12 months' time has gone down to a very low single-digit number, because you've got to look at it. It's there. It's going to happen. So embrace it. Don't ignore it.
Here. You should be an underwater swimmer with holding your breath like that. That was magnificent. Philip?
As an industry, I think it will take a lot more time.
Okay. Joanna?
A scale from 1 to 10, 3 out of 10.
And Ina?
No quantum leaps, but hopefully what we have in place will become smarter and more efficient and help us run our businesses better.
Fabulous. The last word for you, Neil.
I think it will enhance our analytical capabilities to try and make better, less emotional decisions on a wide range of subjects, such as scheduling, as demand drivers, and that will probably be the first thing to come, and then we will progress from there on.
Terrific. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Very much appreciate the spirit in which you've answered all these questions, and I wish you all every success in everything that you do as we go down this journey together that is going to take time. And I wish the industry every success as it embraces AI and data and really gets to grips with everything. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Karen Freeb, who's going to wind us up. So thank you, Karen, and goodbye, and thank you to all our panel.
Thank you, Russell, and thank you very much to all of our panelists, Olivier, Heather, Ina, Joanna, Neil, Philip, and David, for, I hope, shedding some light on this much discussed but still rather opaque subject, where different elements can indeed, as Ina has said, be as clear as mud. So just a few key takeaways that will stick with me. First of all, AI should help deliver mundane tasks more quickly, but not where a personal touch is needed. That was Neil's key message today, I think. Tech just has to work and be invisible to help the industry get heads into beds. I love that. That was from Philip. And Philip also made the point that we all need to gain a better understanding of AI and data in our sector in order to really get under the skin of the issues. It's something we're all going to need to be on top of. AI has a huge part to play in loyalty and guest retention. I think that was David's key message. And I love Joanna's comment that AI needs to be useful and not gimmicky. And how does it get to be truly original? I also love the point that Joanna made that our legal documents and hotel management contracts in particular really need to evolve to bring more clarity. I think in many areas, most of us would agree, but especially when it comes to the data protection space. And to finish with Ina's comments, we need simple, well-executed tech solutions with a true, meaningful impact. We certainly have a way to go to achieve that. So to finish, thanks to our co-hosts today for this webinar, HVS, EP Business in Hospitality, and AlixPartners. And thanks to all of you for listening in to this, our 21st webinar. And please do look out for and join us for our next one. The topic for that is yet to be announced and will be announced in due course. But of course, if you do have any ideas for topics you'd like to see us cover in future webinars, then please do let us know. Thank you very much, everyone.